in the Faculty of Humanities here to the world scholars, international scholars, so that they will get a kind of new insights and perspectives on how actually they learn the language and also the literature and also the culture. Right. On behalf of the moderator today, allow me to lead you to the program. But prior to proceeding to the next agenda, I would like to invite Dr. Ribut Wahyudi or Ribut Wahyudi PhD on behalf of the Dean of Faculty of Humanities to deliver his welcoming remark. Time is yours. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Pak Rafiq, who has opened this, who has introduced Claire Krams. And first of all, we should thank to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala because yesterday, maybe until now, the weather in California is not that good. That's terrible. That what Professor Claire Cram said, but we now still able to have this program running well. First of all, I'd like to inform that the Dean this time joining a program, a university program at the university building. So this morning he asked me to represent on her welcoming speech on his behalf. We in the Faculty of Humanities really, first of all, like to thank to Professor Claire Krams, who has accepted our invitation. Yeah, Professor Claire Krams, as has been mentioned by Pak Rafiq, is a well-known scholar in language and culture. And among the publications is Multilingual Subject, published by Oxford University Press in 2005 or 9, and then Multilingual Instructor. And the last book she has written is A Language as Symbolic Power. Yeah. And secondly, we also like to thank to our students and the committee, our students who have joined this international scholar engagement, and also the committee who have helped us preparing this program happening. And also we also thanks to the guests from other universities, because we share the flyers to professional organizations. We also share the flyers to ESI, English Studies Association in Indonesia, and also LITA, Linguistic and Literature Association in Indonesia. And we also thanks to our colleague from English, the lecturers from English department and also Arabic departments. So I would like to inform Professor Krams that here the students are joining us here from two different departments, Arabic department and English literature departments. So mostly they are from 6th semester students after they enrolled after 3 years. And of course, we cannot predict who, because the flyers is everywhere, we have spread it everywhere. The flyers can attract not only national, or people within Indonesian context, maybe they are also from overseas, because we also spread the flyers to translinguistic groups in which the members are from different geographical locations. This is as far as we concern, of course, not the first. The first international scholar engagement is with Associate Professor Ahmar Mahbub from the University of Sydney. The second one, we have a speaker from the for the same program is Associate Professor Helge Daniels from University of Antwerp, Belgium. And the third one, we have also Dr. Ruani Tupas from University of College London as the third international scholar engagement. And now we are happy to have Professor Claire Krams, who will discuss about language as symbolic power. This is one of the faculty's main regular programs of the faculty. If seen from the university context, it is also a part of our endeavor to implement what is called by university a policy or aim in the future as internationally recognized. So this is a part of international reputation and recognition that our university has aimed for and has to some extent achieved. And through this international scholar engagement, we want to push forward. We want to maintain this intellectual tradition. And the dean also said this morning to me that we need to also introduce to Professor Claire Krams that our new program we have here, we have IES program, where IES means International Youth Enhancing Studies, where overseas students from different countries joining our program to study Indonesian language and culture. That's basically the program is hosted by the Faculty of Humanities. It is free, but the participants should cover their flights from the overseas if they are located in overseas. But if they are located already in Indonesia, then it's much cheaper. But basically, the program here is free, hosted in a Faculty of Humanities. The participants should only cost the flights or the transportation. I think that's also one of the international program that this faculty of humanities and also picked up by the university to put forward, to move forward for the international reputation and recognition. I think without further ado, we will be listening to presentation by Professor Claire Krams. I said earlier to Professor Claire Krams that one of her articles on the relationship between language as symbolic power and also intercultural communications, we have discussed it in our classroom, especially in interculturality, in language and literary studies class. And that having said that, some of the students joining this class, during this Zoom webinar, have understood some of the ideas written by Professor Claire Krams. I think without further ado, we will be listening together Language as Symbolic Power by Professor Claire Krams, and I return the time to the moderator or the host, Pak Rafiq. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for Pak Ribut for his welcoming remark, and also on behalf of the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, officially welcoming our invited guest today, Professor Claire Krams. Once again, it is our great honor, and we are really pleased to have you here, Professor Claire Krams, in delivering new perspectives and insights in relation to the topic. And Professor, you have time about 70 minutes ahead from now. So I think it's your full time to deliver your talk.
Thank you very much for those two wonderful introductions and very generous introductions. I hope you can hear me all right without any echo. And so I will put myself on, let's see. Yeah, I need to put my, whoops, how do I put my, wait a minute. I need to put my my screen on full display. Okay. Ah, there we go. Okay. Okay. So I will be sharing a little bit with you some of my ideas that I developed in my latest book, yes, Language as Symbolic Power. And I hope that by the end of my lecture, it will become a little clearer what I mean by symbolic power and what I mean by symbolic competence. So let me show you what I intend to discuss, if I could. Okay. I will focus on the word symbolic that is not always very clear to everybody. Why I decided to write that book, I will share with you that. Then my talk will have three parts. I will define what Bourdieu means, the French sociologist, what he means by symbolic power, because I will be drawing a lot from his theory of symbolic power in my book, in my talk and in my book. I will also draw on the notion of the politic by Jacques Rancière, a French philosopher, and what I was inspired by Homi Bhabha when I talk about culture. So these will have to be seen as definitions that I will use in the three aspects of symbolic power that form the three parts of my book. One, the power to represent realities, and I will use a fable to illustrate what I mean. The power to shape perceptions, and I will use another fable to also illustrate what I mean. And then I will show that symbolic power is, in a third way, the power to create alternative realities. And I will take as an example a cabinet meeting by Donald Trump in Washington a few years ago. I will end on a third part, symbolic violence in the digital age, and show that symbolic power can be used for positive and less positive ends. And I will have some implications for foreign language educations in my conclusion. So let me, I want to get rid of here my, okay. So let me tell you a few things about why I was interested in the symbolic and what has been going on in the world that prompted me to turn my attention to the symbolic aspect of language. What I'm going to be talking about is, in fact, the subject, the topic of a course that I've been giving at UC Berkeley for undergraduates from all over campus and from all disciplines. I generally have 100, 150 students in that class, and I gave it for 15 years until I retired 8 years ago. And the course was called Language and Power. And many students told me that after that course, their eyes were open to what actually language does or can do. And I decided to make a book out of it. And that is the book that I published. It's not a textbook, but it gathers all the ideas and the topics that we dealt with in that class. My motivation to write and to think about language as symbolic power came from 4 observations. One, I saw that the motivation for learning languages has changed. 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, we used to learn foreign languages, including English, for functional purposes and to gain economic capital. Namely, if you learned English, it allowed you access to a job market that you could not do without English. In my case, as you may know, I am originally French, and I learned German just after World War II in order to facilitate connections with our neighbor, the Germans, across the border. But more and more in recent years, the language learning operation has brought symbolic capital, or what Bourdieu calls a profit of distinction. People who speak English, am I being listened to? All right. People who speak English are perceived as having more savviness, more worldliness, more symbolic power in terms of status and brilliance. More and more, we see the growing importance of perceptions, appearances, statuses, and identities, and that has to do with the growth of the internet and in particular the social media. People pay attention to how you look, how you appear, whether people like you or don't like you, what the way you appear on screen, even the way words are used. In the United States, the word bilingualism has less prestige than the word multilingualism. Multilingualism is perceived as being more cosmopolitan, more worldly, and thus more powerful. The internet also, as symbolic system, has algorithms that both empower and constrain language learners. Algorithms are also a symbolic system that has an invisible power in the way it shapes the knowledge that it distributes and the way the knowledge is used. And according to David Brooks in the New York Times a few months ago, there's a general increase in symbolic warfare in public discourse. He is referring, of course, to the violence and sometimes the hatred and the political hype and exaggerations that occur in public discourse. And he calls that symbolic warfare. And we will talk about that a little later. So I want to deal with 3 questions today related to the symbolic power of language. Number 1, how does language as symbolic system, namely as systems made up of verbal symbols, like the alphabet or writing systems, but also the vocabulary, the grammar, how does it represent, how does it shape, and how does it create social and cultural realities? The second question we will look at is how does symbolic power exercise, how is it exercised in the political construction of culture? And the third question is, but I don't know whether you see that on the screen, is why should students care? Why students of language education should care about language as symbolic power? So I will start with a picture that you know. Let me see whether I can get rid of this. No. Wait a minute. How do I? Anyway. Okay, so that was, sorry, that was the picture from Alice in Wonderland. of Humpty Dumpty sitting on his wall and Alice greeting him by stretching out her hand, as you can see here, and having the following dialogue, which is always quoted among linguists and linguist introduction to linguistics. So Humpty Dumpty says there are 364 days when you might get unbirthday presents. Certainly, says Alice. Alice is a very well brought up, polite little girl, and she doesn't want to contradict, even though she doesn't quite understand what Humpty Dumpty is saying. And Humpty Dumpty says, and only one for birthday presents, you know, there's glory for you. I don't know what you mean by glory, said Alice. Humpty Dumpty smiled contemptuously. Of course you don't, until I tell you. I meant there's a nice knockdown argument for you. But glory doesn't mean a nice knockdown argument, Alice objected. When I use a word, Humpty Dumpty said in a rather scornful tone, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less. The question is, Alice, said Alice, whether you can make words mean so many different things. The question is, said Humpty Dumpty, who is the master? That's all. So this was a story about power. And I will show you, we will discuss, of course, what Humpty Dumpty meant by the question is, who is the master or who has symbolic power? I want to show you another type of little text, which is a cartoon out of a publication that you will recognize, The New Yorker. And here you have a bunch of people who are quite vividly and excitedly talking with one another, with bubbles floating up from their heads, containing what they are saying. And at the door, or has just come in, is a man who holds a bubble also, but somehow he doesn't manage to have it float. So the question we could ask is, what's the problem, either with the people who are talking or the man at the door? Why can't he get his bubble to float? And so this is what we could entertain as discussion. What does the man lack? What might be the matter? So the first thing we could say is that his bubble is filled with words, but with an incorrect grammar or a non-native vocabulary. And language teachers would be quick to say that he is lacking in linguistic competence. But maybe he knows the words and the grammar, but he didn't use the right speech act. So maybe what his problem is in fact pragmatic competence. He is not pragmatically competent. Or he has an impolite way of talking. And in that case, we could say he lacks sociolinguistic competence. But maybe he comes from another country, or he comes from the West Coast, and he does not know the New York culture of the guys who are there at the cocktail party. So he lacks cultural competence. Then again, we could say, according to Michael Barham's 5 categories of intercultural competence, that he knows how to speak, he knows how to understand, but he doesn't know how to engage, and he doesn't know how to be, his attitude. He doesn't have the right attitude. So he lacks intercultural competence. But then I look at it from a different angle. And I say, how about if he doesn't understand the power game? He doesn't understand the cocktail game. He doesn't understand how to get into the conversation. And that is symbolic competence. Maybe he is not perceived as a legitimate speaker. Look at him. He comes with glasses. He's almost the only one with glasses. He looks like a foreigner. He's got a different mustache from the other men. He stands there, he holds his bubble, and the bubble doesn't float maybe what he does lack is institutional legitimacy. Maybe everybody else has a little tag on their suit, and it says Harvard or Berkeley or Yale or Stanford, and he doesn't have the tag. So he lacks legitimacy. And he doesn't know how to reframe the context of conversation. He doesn't know how to introduce a topic or how to make himself interesting. All this, I will argue, is part of symbolic competence. And so I will quote here something that Bourdieu says, but if I could get rid of my bar here in the bottom. No, I want to go back here. Wait a minute. I don't know how to get rid of this bar no. Well, I'm going to have to tell you what's underneath. The competence adequate to produce sentences that are likely to be understood may be quite inadequate to produce sentences that are likely to be listened to, likely to be recognized as acceptable in all the situations in which it is such a recognition is important. Acceptability is not reducible to mere grammaticality. Can I ask Ribu to know how to get rid of my bottom bar here on my screen? Well,
here is the expert of this problem.
So what is the problem actually, Professor?
Can you read the whole quotation?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Bourdieu, 1991.
Okay.
Page 55.
Okay, it's only me that I don't have it. So that's good because you can read it. Okay. So let's go on. So the question is, what is symbolic power? And I'm giving you here the definition by Pierre Bourdieu. And it's rather tough, so I'll focus on the highlights in red. Symbolic power is the power of constituting the given through utterances, of making people see and believe, of confirming or transforming the vision of the world, and thereby action on the world, and thus the world itself. Anyway, let me end the show. Maybe that'll be better. Okay. That power is an almost magical power which enables one to obtain through persuasion and mobilization the equivalent of what is obtained through force, whether physical or economic, but only if it is misrecognized as natural and legitimate. So let me paraphrase here. Symbolic power is not the power to punch you in the face. That is force. That is physical power. Symbolic power is psychological power, is emotional power, the power to make you do things because you feel they are legitimate and because you feel that the authority of the speaker is trustworthy and is a natural endowment. So let me continue. Wow, wait a minute. Okay, that's the continuation of the quote from Pierre Bourdieu. What creates the power of words and slogans, a power capable of maintaining or subverting the social order, is the belief in the legitimacy of words and of those who utter them. And words alone cannot create this belief. So in my talk, I'm going to be talking a lot about legitimacy. What gives you the right to speak, like the man at the door? He had all the right vocabulary. He had all the right grammar, perhaps, but he was not perceived as being a legitimate speaker or being entitled to join the crowd and speak. And that's about symbolic power. That is the symbolic competence that is distributed between the man at the door and the group that he wants to join. I will be talking about politics, of course, because when you talk about politics, you talk of power. And when you talk of power, you normally talk of politics. But what do we mean by politics? Jacques Rancière, the French philosopher, distinguishes two ways of talking about politics. In French, it's a feminine la politique or the masculine le politique. La politique is the exercise of symbolic power to win elections and govern a country. That's what in English we mean generally by politics. It's party politics. But there's another way of talking about politics, and that's le politique, the masculine kind of noun. And that's the exercise of symbolic power in the life of a community and the development of political acumen or savviness. So it's in addition to the linguistic, pragmatic, intercultural competence, it's a certain savviness of judging the context, reading the context, that will give you the ability to participate in the conversation. And finally, what do I mean by culture? I will use Homi Bhabha in his book, The Location of Culture. Culture is the network of symbolic representations and practices fought over by social actors who seek to establish their legitimacy vis-à-vis others and to influence their perception and understanding of events. So we're dealing with the capacity to make meaning symbolic through symbols, symbols that are most of the time verbal, but also gestural, corporal, sound symbols, etc., to make the context hospitable to your taking part in it. Let me see. Culture is always a site of struggle for symbolic power. As speakers address one another in the I and you space of communication, they create what Homi Bhabha calls the third space of enunciation that gets its legitimacy from the institution that has made the exchange possible. So when we want to talk, when we want to participate in public life, it's not enough to have the right vocabulary and the right grammar. We have to have the legitimacy to speak, and that legitimacy is given by our position in the public space of institutions, schools, classrooms, etc. This third space locates culture in the political process of negotiation of meaning that is in the exercise of symbolic power. Okay. I'm now going to pass to my second part, which is going to be, how do we illustrate language as representation, language as action, and language as the creation of alternate realities? And I'm going to start with symbolic power as the power to signify and to represent symbolic reality. And I'm going to take as an example the most outrageous, the most blatant expression, representation of symbolic power, which is one of the French last kings, Louis XIV. And I'm doing that because I'm French originally, and I come actually from my hometown, Versailles, which is where these two portraits were made. You have here the 30-year-old monarch, Louis XIV, who reigned from 1643 to 1715, one of the longest reigns in the French monarchy before the French Revolution of 1789. He is here on the left as your young, dashing monarch who has not yet the picture was made in 1668, which is the beginning of the Palace of Versailles. He was having Versailles built for him, and many of you, I'm sure, have been to France and to Versailles, which is only 20 kilometers from Paris. The second portrait is the same guy, 60 years old or 65 years old, and that is in the full glory and glamour of the monarchy around 1701. That's almost 15 years before he died. Let me see. Okay. In that slide, from these two slides, you have somebody called Louis Marin, who wrote a book about the portrait of the king and the representation of the king. And he shows that the word to represent means to refer to somebody. So as you say, the king refers to those two portraits, those two pictures of the king at different periods of their lives, and signify power and public representation. But the word to represent always means also to stand for. If you have the picture of the king hanging on your wall, it's like having God looking on your daily life. It is, in fact, the king. So when you show the picture of the king, it's almost for people who hang up that portrait in their house or in their palace, it's almost having the king there. It evokes a picture in your mind. To represent also means to stage, to characterize, to portray, like on a stage, and certainly to legitimize. So that portrait is the legitimation of the king. I want to show you now, we want to discuss a little fable, a little poem that was written by the poet of the court, that was Jean de La Fontaine. Jean de La Fontaine was the poet at the court of this king in France. And you can imagine how a poet at the court of such a potent, such a powerful king has to be careful about what he says. He wrote the poem for the young king to teach him all about symbolic power and power as a king. And as I'm going to read aloud the poem, we are going to ask ourselves, how is power represented in that fable that is called The Wolf and the Lamb, Le Loup et l'Agneau? How does brute force become symbolic power? And what role does discourse play in this transformation? So here goes the poem. The strong are all, and that's my English translation, the strong are always the best at proving they are right. Witness the case we're now going to cite. A lamb was drinking at a brook that was flowing downstream, pure and clean. From the hills comes a wolf in search of adventure. His sharp hunger had drawn him to the scene. What makes you so bold as to muck up my beverage? The creature snarls in rage. You will pay for your impudence. Sir, the lamb replies, let not your majesty give in to unjust anger, but rather please consider, sir, that I'm drinking, just look, in the brook, 20 feet below your majesty, if not more. And therefore in no way at all can I be muddying your majesty's drink. You are muddying it, insists the cruel beast. And I know that last year you spoke ill of me. How could I do that? Says the lamb. I was not yet born. I am still suckling at my mother's breast. If it wasn't you, then it was your brother, all the worse. I don't have a brother. Then it's someone else in your clan. For me, you are all the same, a curse. You, your shepherds, and your dogs. I have been told I must take revenge. And with that, deep into the woods, The wolf drags the lamb and eats him up without any further judicial ado. So we could ask with Marin, why does the wolf need to argue with the lamb over more than 20 lines before actually pouncing on him and devouring him? And why does the lamb go along with it? That's a justified question. Power is force that has appropriated for itself the discourse of justice, that stands for justice and is therefore considered justified and legitimate. Through language, force creates a world in which actions will be justified, an imaginary world, but also a moral world. How does the wolf create such a world? Note, of course, that this is a fable. So you have talking wolves and talking lambs, which doesn't exist, of course, in the real world. In the real world, wolves just pounce on lambs and eat them up. But here, of course, everybody in those days recognizes the wolf as the king. But the king cannot just kill his subjects. He has to have a reason. He has to show that he is justified in doing that. So it's worthwhile looking how he does it. So what we have in this poem, in this fable, is a prosecution discourse. In French, réquisitoire. We have almost like a legal discourse. First, the wolf accuses the lamb of offending the majesty, the royal majesty. He uses the word tu, which is the familial pronoun that you never use with a king. And he doesn't give any factual evidence at all. And in fact, it's the lamb who has to remind him that he can't possibly muddy the water because he's 20 feet beneath him. The wolf accuses the lamb of slander and fake news. Yeah, your dogs, you always say that you always say bad things about me. He defames the family of the lamb, defamation. He says bad things, calumny about the family of or rather he accuses the lamb of defaming him. He smears the whole shepherd economy. He resorts to hearsay and self-pity. We call that today grievance politics, and casts the responsibility on his impending action on anonymous actions, the anonymous actions of anonymous others. When he says, I've been told I must take revenge, those of you who know French realize that there's a different kind of relationship in the pronouns here. On me l'a dit, il faut que je me venge. There are two possible meanings for the pronoun it. I've been told it, I must take revenge. It can mean I have been told that you are a curse, so I have to take revenge. Or I have been told that I have to take revenge, and then I will take it for past wrongs. In both cases, that sentence shows that the actions of the strongest are justified through reference to public opinion and reasons of state. As the king, I have to save my honor and kill you in order to save my honor, or public opinion. People have said that I have been offended, and therefore I have to kill you. All this to show that kings and powerful people have to justify their actions. Otherwise, they're going to have a revolt, a revolution on their hands. But why is the lamb portrayed this way? The lamb, in fact, by arguing with the wolf, is made to be complicit in the wolf's logic. The lamb says, but I can't possibly muddy your water. I am 20 feet below you. The lamb says, I don't have any brother So the lamb is constantly disagreeing with the wolf, hoping that he will not eat him up because he has no real reason to do so. Rationality and logic backed by institutional power gives you legitimate authority. And we can see the fable is constructed absolutely according to deductive logic, to demonstration. And that's what the lamb accepts the rationale and the logic of the wolf by constantly getting into the argument. Some people, when I discuss that fable, say, why doesn't the lamb run away? Why doesn't he call his shepherd rather than arguing with the wolf? So we have here in that fable an ambiguous morality and a legalistic legitimation for killing the lamb. Of course, this fable the poet in this fable has to be rather tactful, because the poet has to support the monarchy. He is writing this poem for the king. He doesn't want to disagree with the king, but at the same time, he wants to show the king how he needs to use justice to justify his force. And this is why you have in the beginning of that poem, La raison du plus fort est toujours la meilleure, which is not might is right, but the reasons given by the more powerful are always the best, because they have the force of argument behind the physical force to kill someone. And the truth is, like Humpty Dumpty will say, a question of who is the master. That's all. That's all means we live in a civil society, in a civilized world, where actions are justified through the legitimacy that society gives them. We have a little bit of that in that again, a New Yorker cartoon, where you have the wolf on the poster saying, I am going to eat you, and most of the lamb are looking down and not looking at the poster, but two of the sheep are looking at the poster and saying, he tells it like it is. They know they're going to be eaten, but they say he is justified in doing so. So how is all this relevant to the present day? I remember in 2018, when Trump first came to power, he had a meeting with the president of Canada, Trudeau, and the meeting was reported in the New York Times as follows. The latest instance of Mr. Trump bending the truth emerged when the president boasted about his disingenuous exchange with Mr. Trudeau at a recent fundraising dinner for a Senate candidate in Missouri. There had been a dispute between Canada and the United States over potentially crippling duties on steel and aluminum that the president introduced last week, and that have provoked equal parts anxiety, puzzlement, and anger in Canada. And Mr. Trump wrote on Twitter, we do have a trade deficit with Canada, as we do with almost all countries, parenthesis, some of them massive. In an audio recording from the dinner, the New York Times continues, obtained by the Post, Mr. Trump recounted how he pressed that point in a meeting with Mr. Trudeau, even had no idea whether it was true. And the New York Times comments on the events. Mr. Trump's retelling drew rebukes from some diplomats and lawmakers who argued that it reflected a dangerous penchant by the commander-in-chief to misrepresent the truth. And I will jump to the next sentence that I have highlighted in red. The president's admission that he's literally making things up while speaking face-to-face with a world leader should stop us all in our tracks. Can we have any confidence in what our president says when he admits he is lying. Now, you will recall that the American press was quite obsessed with the fact that they said Trump was lying. But in the meantime, lying from politicians is something that we encounter every day, and it's not, people are less sanguine about the lying. They consider that as a representation of an alternate truth. We can reconstitute the exchange as the following. Trump tweets, "We do have trade deficit with Canada, as we do with almost all countries." And Trump telling his supporters about his encounter with Justin Trudeau, he said, no, we have no trade surplus with you, we have none. And Donald, please, I said. And I said, wrong, Justin, you do. Yeah, I didn't even know, I had no idea, I just said, you're wrong. You know why? Because we're so stupid. In other words, Trump is making a point of showing that that is all representation and all symbolic power use on people who feel that we are stupid, but we're not, because we are savvy and we've got the savviness to use language in that way. Okay, let me read the last paragraph that I have here. By focusing on Trump's misrepresentations of the truth and his bullying practices, the press and the media might have barked up the wrong tree. The major feature of Trump's view of symbolic power is that it is all representation, perception, and optics. In Trump's populist discourse, the appearance of power is all. So this, for me, is an extreme case of the use of symbolic power, not to kill a lamb, but to look powerful and to make people believe that you are powerful. So much for the wolf and the lamb. I want to take now language not as representation, but language as action, as symbolic action, and as the power to shape perceptions. So I'm taking another fable from La Fontaine that he also wrote for the young king to show him, to warn him about too much flattery when he gets to govern. So you probably know the fable of the crow and the fox, or the fox and the crow, that goes like this. Master Crow, perched on a tree, held in his beak a cheese. Master Fox, enticed by the smell, held forth more or less in these words. Hey, good day, sir of the crow, how pretty you are, how handsome you look. To be truthful, if your song is like your feathers, you are the phoenix of the denizens of this world. At these words, the crow was beside himself with joy, and to show his beautiful voice, he opened his large beak, letting fall his prey. The fox seized it and said, my good sir, learn that every flatterer lives at the expense of his listeners. This lesson was well worth a cheese, no doubt. Ashamed and embarrassed, the crow swore, but a little too late, that he would not be taken in again. Let us look at the way the fox uses language, that is symbolic words, symbols, verbal symbols, to cajole and to flatter his victim. He calls him Master Crow, giving him a title that the ugly old crow does not deserve, but that is flattery. He held in his beak a cheese. Now watch. We have the same verb to hold, holding a cheese, and holding forth in these words. The fox holds words in his mouth like the crow holds the cheese. But the fox uses the word to flatter the crow to let the cheese fall, because he is hungry for cheese, whereas the crow is hungry for words. He calls him Sir of the Crow. How handsome you look. All this is a criticism of the appearance, and the crow is all about appearance. Being from the upper class, he's not that hungry for cheese. He's hungry for compliments and for flattery. To be truthful, you are the phoenix of the denizens of this wood. The phoenix is a metaphor for rising from the ashes. It's the most beautiful and the most elite bird that you can figure out. And so the fact that the fox takes the crow for an educated man can only flatter the crow. At these words, and to show his beautiful voice, he lets down his prey. He learns a little too late that he shouldn't be taken in again. Of course, it's not. It's when the poet ends the fable with, it's a little too late. Well, it's too late for the cheese, but the whole society being built on flattery, the crow will fall again for flattery, because flattery is the name of the game. So symbolic power expresses itself discursively in that fable through the crow's vocal performance and through the performative. In fact, the words of the fox have the power, have the perlocutionary effect of having the crow let go of the cheese. It's an aspect of the fox's speech acts, as well as through the protagonist's observance of the cooperative principle that you learn in conversation analysis. They are both absolutely matched with one another. The fox is totally master of the pragmatics of flattery, and we can speak of the illocutionary force of his words that have perlocutionary effects on the listener. So one of the ways we wield symbolic power through words is through the speech act theory that you all know. The question is, why did the crow not eat the cheese as soon as he had stolen it? Because the crow doesn't manufacture cheese. The crow stole the cheese that was drying on the windowsill of the farmer's wife. Why does the crow fall for the words of the fox? The fox has physical hunger, but the crow has symbolic hunger. He wants the good appearances and to sound upper class. The punishment is a moral embarrassment for the crow, and social shame, of course, which is all symbolic punishment. The winners are those who, like the fox, can play the game of self-promotion while ridiculing the game itself. And that is the cunning of both the fox and the poet. The poet wants to show the bad consequences of flattery to the king and to his subjects. The discourse of flattery is, of course, not symbolic power, it's also symbolic violence. The fox is sycophantic and the crow is narcissistic. They both display a certain symbolic competence. In other words, they know how to use the symbolic system for their own ends. And it's adapted to the situation and the general cultural conditions, namely the political power of the king and its ambiguity, and the eulogy of the flattering of the king that is also a criticism of the flattery of the king. So La Fontaine, as the poet, one could say, makes use of symbolic competence also in that third space of enunciation. Just to make you smile, I want to show you the relevance to the present day. When Donald Trump was in power, he made a whole use of flattery to legitimize himself. We have here a cabinet meeting that I'm just going to show you. You have the lights of the cameras and the press around the cabinet meeting. you have Trump and Pence on the two sides of the long table, and you have Trump who forced to ask every single cabinet member to say something nice about him and flattering about him. And here is some of what you hear around the table. For instance, in red, because of your leadership, Mr. President, and because of the strong support of the leadership in the Congress of the United States, you are delivering on that middle-class miracle. You got the Congress to do with tax cuts for working families and American businesses what they haven't been able to do for 31 years. Mr. President, I want to thank you for speaking on behalf of and fighting every day for the forgotten men and women of America. This is the kind of generalized flattery that you got in recent American politics. You must have read that in your own press. Pence paused for praising Trump only briefly, but in doing so, he made clear that it was because Trump wanted him to. That was the name of the game. And that these were members of a team that Trump was savvy enough to have assembled. I know you would have me also acknowledge the people around this table, Mr. President, your outstanding team and your great legislative team. So he praised Trump indirectly and joined the group of flatterers around Trump. Note the importance of third party in any exercise of symbolic power. We have in the two fables that I read to you, the fables were, as a French person, I learned those fables by heart when I grew up. This was the poems that we were given in elementary school to learn. We never learned the political side of those poems. We were keen to the moral message, but we all thought that the power of the king was justified, was legitimate. We were not taught that they led to the French Revolution. That was part of the conservative time just after the war when I went to school. So I was the recipient of the two fables' moral message as a young youngster growing up in France in the 50s. Both the wolf and the fox are speaking to a well-educated readership who understands what it means to be a phoenix in the woods. So the fables are always, you have to take not only the fox and the crow or the wolf and the lamb, but the people who read those texts are complicit, like the lamb, in the making of the moral of these fables. And Trump and his cabinet, you notice the flashes and the microphones hovering over the table. He is speaking to a third-party audience before the cameras, and that is also part of the symbolic game. How do these three stories refine our understanding of the workings of symbolic power? In all three stories, symbolic power is an unavoidable fact of social life. It is a struggle for recognition, honor, respect, and self-esteem. It is gained and sustained through grammar and vocabulary, through performatives, and through multimodal ways of making meaning and gaining legitimacy as a meaning maker, not just as a speaker, but a meaning maker. And it is highly mediated through the technology that we use to manipulate the listeners. So let me give you again the definition of symbolic power that I gave you in the beginning. Symbolic power is the power of constituting the given, of creating reality, of making, in fact, the situation in which we are and the roles that we play legitimate, of making people see and believe and transforming the vision of the world and thereby the action of the world on the world and thus the world itself. That is the symbolic power that the guy in the New Yorker cartoon did not have, and why his bubble did not was incapable of floating. It's the power which enables one to obtain through persuasion and mobilization the equivalent of what is obtained through force. Of course, you're going to say the wolf not only used symbolic power, but he used in the end physical power. But through his symbolic power, he managed to keep the lamb arguing and not fleeing, so that he could more easily eat him up in the end. Symbolic violence in the digital age, the internet has exacerbated the struggles over symbolic systems through its semantic architecture, the speed and scope of its dissemination of information, and the ability to shape the way we think through its constant reorganization of knowledge. This is something that I deal with in my book, is that the algorithms that provide us with the knowledge on the internet are, in fact, acting upon us through an invisible symbolic power, symbolic because it uses ones and zeros and words on the screen. And this is something that is being written about more and more these days, particularly since we now have ChatGPT that is making everybody quite anxious. Let's see. I think, why should language studies students care about symbolic power? That's because the digital revolution is also a cultural revolution in which language itself has acquired a new value. A referential truth versus multiple truths. Everybody is talking about the truth value of language. Is language discovering meaning or making meaning? Do our students only discover the meanings of the dictionary, or are they creating new meaning? Are we learning English or another language to get to know other people who speak that language, or to network and gain influence and gain symbolic capital? Are we representing reality or manipulating cultural reality? Social media with the friendler, the befriending and the likes and the dislikes is in fact manipulating reality, not just representing reality. So what are we teaching foreign languages for? We're taking the le politique into account in foreign language education, meaning the power to do things and to represent things and to transform things with words. We're raising learners' awareness of symbolic power in communication. We are drawing explicit relations of speech acts and their perlocutionary effects. We are recognizing that symbolic power is based on reciprocity and the complicity of all. And we're problematizing the natural and taken for granted social order. Not kings will be kings and wolves will be wolves and bosses will be bosses, but we are problematizing their legitimacy. And ultimately, paying attention to language as symbolic power is moving from savoir-faire to savoir-penser, meaning from knowing how to do things with words or to say things with words, to knowing how to think, and to think of how we are manipulating the context or shaping the context in order for us to be able to position ourselves as usefully as possible for ourselves. The conclusion, there we go. Culture in foreign language education today is no longer conceived as the mere context in which a foreign language gets learned and used, but a process by which we construct, interpret, and negotiate the symbolic meaning of the world around us and our place within it. An eminently political process that requires not only savoir-dire and savoir-faire, these are Michael Barham's categories, but also savoir penser, which is knowing how to be aware and to think of all this. Okay, I think I have some references that you can read, because I think I sent you the PowerPoint, but I want to thank you for your attention. I think I've spoken a little too long, but you can get in touch with me with at ccrums.berkeley.edu. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very thought-provoking presentations, and I believe that the participants and the attendees in this virtual talk are really keen on, also asking some questions and maybe to interact with you directly. And now I think this is the chance for the attendees of this virtual talk to ask questions. We still have about 45 minutes, Professor, before we end the program.
Very good.
So, yeah. Is there any question? So, well, I'm afraid I'm too committed to summarize this, but I believe the conclusion says it all. Right. We have one. Wait, let me check. Just raise your hand virtually. Right. We have someone here, Maulana Muhammad Fikri. Yeah. Okay, another individual. Okay, so I also received some, message, written questions. I will post it later. Right.
So
maybe
you can read them for me, because I don't know how to.
Yeah, for sure. Yes. Maybe we will come to Maulana Muhammad first. Please, you can ask the Professor Claire Crums directly. Maulana Fikri.
I'm reading. I've opened the chat, so I've got some questions. I've got one question here.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, Mrs. Claire Crums. Welcome to our meeting, and I hereby give you gratitude and give you welcome to Indonesia in a virtual world. I should sincerely thank you on how you explain to us the language as symbolic power, which is very, very intriguing and interesting for me, as we are the language and literature students. But I not really in the major of English language and literature. I'm an Arabic language and literature student, but yeah, I can still speak English. And my question is, does the symbolic power of language really can be taken from the history itself, or can be indirectly researched from a certain point in time in human civilization itself? This question brings up to me because of how the Westernization, the American culture, like the raps and some other forms of language, or like music and something like that, can be taken apart in many symbolic power. Like many of us teenagers have taken inspiration from other people's words, but doesn't really have clear meanings. Just like what you have already example to us, like the Wolf and the Lamb, something like that. We just have kind of clear meaning on what they want to say to the audience or to the readers itself. Can you understand my question?
Yeah, I would be grateful if somebody would Reboot or somebody would.
Okay.
Would
is your questions, can symbolic power also manifested in, say, for example, through the music? Yes, because we are hugely exposed to Western music. So is it fair to say that symbolic powers also feasible to be manifested through that particular medium of cultural products or art products?
Yes,
Is
totally.
it your question?
Yes, that's my
Yes,
question.
of course.
Okay.
Because music is a symbolic system. Yes, any kind of modality, gestures, sound, music, visual, movies, etc., exercise symbolic power. I mean, there were the Oscars this weekend in Los Angeles. If you think this was an exercise in symbolic power and symbolic violence, I would say. Yes, but you had a question about the researching symbolic power, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
So
I've got a question here. Professor Clear, in the field of family, can we say that parents have symbolic power through words? Yes. Oh, yes. Such as orders, advices to construct a certain identity of their children. Of course. Of course. And in fact, in that course that I give on language and power, I send them to their family as an assignment. They have to go in the family and tape a dinner table conversation. Who speaks and who interrupts whom, and who takes the floor and who decides what to be talked about and what not to be talked about. How are you socialized in the family? This is all about social power. And the parents either have well, the parents are given a certain authority or a certain legitimacy because they are parents, but in different countries and in different cultures, they are given different kinds of symbolic power through the culture, through the tradition, through the respect of the parents or non-respect of the parents. And who has more symbolic power, the school or the parents? Definitely.
Okay. So there is another questions also posted by Ibu Parawati. So the question is that how important is it for teacher or educators, English pre-service teachers, and also English learners to interrogate symbolic violence they have encountered?
They have what's the last word?
How important is it for teachers,
Yes,
especially English pre-service teachers
yes,
and English learners, to interrogate symbolic, maybe to exercise symbolic violence, or
yes,
to interrogate, to ask, to investigate maybe symbolic violence they have encountered, they have met.
In concert?
Encountered. They have found.
Counted. I think it is extremely important for language teachers to be aware of the symbolic power that is being used, that is being exercised in the classroom, the symbolic power that they have when they prevent a student, or when they build on a student's utterances, or don't, when they give the floor to a student, or don't give the floor to a student, or give the floor to the girls more than to the boys, or to the boys more than to the girls, and for the teacher to be aware of controlling or checking the symbolic power that one student exercised over the rest of the class. If the student speaks too much, or speaks or has more influence on the class than others. Yes, the teacher is constantly monitoring the exchange of symbolic power in the classroom. Okay, Bourdieu's idea of forms of capital, by analyzing some poems of a particular Indonesian poet, would you say using critical discourse analysis is a correct methodology to analyze poems and identify the poet's ideology and worldview? Yeah, well, certainly, yes. In my days, the teacher was always asking, what did the author intend to say? Which is not always the right question to ask, in my view. But what are the conditions that led the poet to write the poem as he wrote it, or she? So yes, bringing in the historical conditions of enunciation of the text or the poem or the short story is absolutely essential to show to interpret and help the student interpret the text. Yes. What does the word symbolic really mean in symbolic power? There are at least two things. Symbolic because language is a symbolic system, because language is made of words and words are semiotic symbols. They are symbols for something, referring to something else. So the symbols stand for things in the world. In that sense, language is a symbolic system and has the power of symbols to act on people's emotions, people's ideas, people's thoughts. This is not something, the linguistic sign is also a semiotic sign that has meaning and therefore can shape people's minds and people's thoughts by the very typology of its grammar and its vocabulary. That's one thing. That's the linguist's definition of symbolic. But there's also the sociological definition of symbolic. And that is the definition of Pierre Bourdieu, who is a sociologist. And so symbolic is the contrary of physical. It is not physical force, it's symbolic force that is a power to influence you, the power of suggestion, the power to impress you, the power to make you feel good or make you feel bad, the power to lead you to action. I don't know whether that has clarified for the person who put the
we received a lot of questions here in the chat box. So can I help you read some
what
of them?
do I have here? I have relativity in language. How is relative? No, wait a minute. The message. No, wait a minute. New messages. No. Okay, I don't, wait a minute. Direct message. No, I can't get any new message. Wait a minute. Thank you so much for the thought provider. I was wondering what the difference would be between symbolic violence and symbolic power. Yes, and also is symbolic violence present in every daily interaction? Yes, there is. I have to admit that Pierre Bourdieu is he uses the term symbolic violence, but he uses it in French. I read Bourdieu in French, and in French, there is an expression to do violence onto someone. That is to make somebody do something, whether they want to do it or not, is to suggest or to have so much psychological influence on that person that you make him or her do things that they wouldn't do if they were not forced to do it. And that is doing violence onto them. So the word violence is almost putting pressure on somebody. And indeed, when in daily life we are constantly doing violence to people, not with a bad intention, and in fact, one could say that the whole educational system is making symbolic violence to children who don't want to be in school or who don't like to be in school, but we need to educate them, and therefore sometimes we need to do violence to them, which is, in English, it sounds rather bad. In French, it's not necessarily bad. But when we want to change kids or children in school, when we want to change their attitude, we have to educate them. We have to lead them out of the attitude that they have and adopt another attitude. And Pierre Bourdieu would say that this is sometimes doing violence to them. Okay, what other questions are there?
Yes, there is a question from Pedro Bastos. The difference, okay, it's been tackled already. So, and also we have a question from Mr. Yusuf from Banjarmasin, somewhere in Borneo. So the question is that in the context of linguicism, do you think translanguaging, sorry?
In the context of what?
The context of linguicism.
Linguicism, okay.
Yes, linguicism. Do you think translanguaging is a good way of practicing the symbolic power to support mother tongue or a local language?
Well, on the face of it, one could say that translanguaging is a savvy way, is a way that has a certain savviness, namely seizing the moment when it would be more opportune to use an English word or an Indonesian word or a word in a yet a different language or in a dialect, in order to respond to a context in which that would be appropriate. Not random translanguaging between languages, but a conscious, meaningful switch in language can have an enormous amount of power. And in fact, yes, I mean, there was an example that I have of a couple who had a little boy, and the mother was Danish and the father was French, and the child wanted to get up from table, and he was getting up from table, and the mother says, "What do you say?" And the kid says, "Tak famal," which means "thank you for the dinner." And the father didn't want to be left behind, so he said, "How do you say it in French?" And the child said, "I'm not hungry anymore," he said in French. So the child was able to manipulate the language according to the context, which was not a translation from one to the other, but using the context to choose the best language to use in that context. There's a...
Okay. Okay. Mr. Ibu, do you have any question?
Not actually not questions, but I like your conclusion, Professor Claire Krams, where the word symbolic here is more active rather than passive. So we have a chance to negotiate, and that's really because I am so far post-structuralist also. This is really post-structural in context where we are active agent rather than the passive recipients of a meaning.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. Yes.
And,
Well, that's the
yeah.
reason. That was the reason why early in my work I used the word third place.
Oh yes, yes.
I thought that the word third place was too structuralist, was too static. Learn another language, you are not in a third place. You are constantly negotiating, constantly processing your words and your body language to match the demands of the context. And the context is always very fluid. And you're constantly having to use the words that are going to be the most appropriate for the situation.
Professor Krams, I have a look at a glance your book, Language as Symbolic Power, and I noticed that you mobilize some of the key ideas from the big names in the fields, for example, like Bourdieu, Bakhtin, and other scholars. How can you, how can you make it balance the use of these different big names in your work? Sometimes you refer to Pierre Bourdieu, sometimes you refer to also Michael Bakhtin's work, Dialogic, and sometimes you also refer to other scholars' ideas. How can you make it balance in your work in this language of symbolic power?
Well, I guess you said it yourself. I in my work, because of my biography and because of where I come from, I am particularly suspicious of dualities of native speaker versus non-native speaker, L1 versus L2, C1 versus C2. I am suspicious of binaries and of it's either one or the other. Either you're a native speaker or you're a non-native speaker. I'm always looking for a way of getting out of these binaries. That was because my father was French, my mother was English, and France and England were not particularly friends throughout the centuries. So my mother and the world of my father were two different worlds. And I felt that I was in the middle, or that I belonged to both and yet to neither. So I decided to go into German. And that's why I became teacher of German, so that I was not in French and not in English, not the language of my mother, not the language of my father. So it started out with a desire to be post-structuralist, to get out of those binaries and dualities. And my choice of theories gravitated towards those people who, like me, were a little outside the mainstream. Bourdieu is a typical example of somebody who was not born in Paris, who was born in the provinces, who ended up being in a milieu that he was not originally, and feeling like in a third place, if you wish. Bakhtin, yes, Bakhtin, because Bakhtin was in a communist country, but was both reflecting on the system, but outside the system. So my choice of theories was people who were postmodern or postmodern like Judith Butler, or
yeah.
structuralist like de Certeau, like Foucault, like Bourdieu, a lot of the French theoreticians.
Yes, thank you for your very interesting explanation, Professor Claire Krams. We really enjoy your talk. Maybe other questions from other participants are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Professor, maybe we will have 2 more questions. Yeah, there is a question from our participant, our talks participant today. So the question is that there are many politicians that, you know, gave and deliver, you know, speeches in public. But then, of course, there are also many people who ignore them. So is it because of a matter of trustworthiness, or can we say that it is because of you know, symbolic incompetence?
So wait a minute, that I understand correctly. The speeches of politicians, some people follow them, some people ignore them, some people are outraged by them. Is it a question of symbolic incompetence, or is it a question of symbolic competence? Symbolic competence, like symbolic power, does not have any moral, it's neither good nor bad. In other words, you can behave in a symbolically competent way by ignoring the politicians. Ignoring them is also, can be symbolically competent, because you are avoiding the controversy that makes you sick to your stomach.
Okay. So, okay, I will also read another question from our participant. When the participant sees the status of people on social media, it refers to personal, but sometimes the appeal is sometimes ignored because everyone interprets each word differently. So how is the application of symbolic power in social media? Because the interpretation may be varied from one individual to another. So how this symbolic power is, you know, operating in a social media?
Yeah, the property of social media is not just to give you a platform to exchange ideas. The social media is constructed the way it is, or the platforms are constructed the way they are, for maximum engagement, maximum outrage, maximum addiction. So if you take Facebook, for instance, or Twitter, the algorithms of Facebook and Twitter are designed to keep you engaged and keep you talking and keep you arguing as long as possible, so that you can have then the feeds and the news feeds that are going to sell you products, but also encourages a kind of an outrage, encourages anger and frustration, or the airing of grievances that are manipulated by the algorithms themselves. So the platforms are not just an innocuous, innocent place to exchange ideas. It is, you are being manipulated by the way knowledge is presented to you. through the like button, or the befriend, the friends, and your the messages that you leave on your wall, etc. It encourages people to pay attention to how they are viewed, they are liked or not liked, and it's the public sanction of yourself that is addicted in itself. That's how it's been presented. And so it's difficult to talk about exchanges on social media like you would on face-to-face, because you have that layer of algorithms under the platform that is already sifting what you have.
Okay, that's all. So I think we still have time actually before we really end the program at 11, but let me offer the participants who still have, questions. Oh, Rosin, you raise your hand. Mr. Rosin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Please.
Pak Rafiq. Hello, Professor Krams. Thank you for very thought-provoking lecture talk. Well, I'd like to frame my questions rather ontologically, perhaps, where when we talk about language as symbolic power, well, where this symbolic power actually resides, is it in the language itself, or language is rather, a means to exert the power that is actually, that is actually has been there as an attributive power possessed by the speaker?
Yeah, that's a fundamental and very important question. The power is in the use of symbols. In the old days, or in the Middle Ages, when we believed in shamans and priests and magicians, there were these magic formulas that you would say, "Sesame, open," or you would you would use the magic word. In fairy tales, you have the magic words that open doors or make things happen. That, of course, doesn't exist anymore. You cannot open the door just by saying "door open," like "sesame open." You can't do that. That's part of, but the use of symbols, unlike the use of other verbal actions, the use of symbols has an effect on the psyche of the people who decipher them, who interpret them, because symbols, like any semiotic sign, a linguistic sign. For instance, when you see the sign along the road, drive carefully, or drive only 50 miles per hour, you automatically slow down. And yet your action is responding directly to the sign that you see along the road. So signs have an effect. And the effect of your words is psychologically as if you had given your interlocutor, you had given him a kiss, or you had shown him affection through your words. So words have an effect, an impact, if you wish, a semiotic impact, which is how you can say that And music is also a symbolic system in the sense that it acts on your perception. It acts on your heart. I mean, I'm using metaphors here, but it acts on your imagination through the perception, through the rhythm, through the embodied perception of the words, the sounds, the music, the shape of the words. And that's where when you read a poem, you can cry, even though these are only signs on the page, but they're signs to which you attribute meaning. And it's that symbolic meaning that touches you, that makes you irritated, that makes you tear up the letter that you don't want to read, etc. Does that make sense?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you, Prof. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe thank you, Mr. Rosin, for the questions. Maybe we will end up picking one more question. Maybe this is that we missed. So there is one more question, Prof. Claire. Apart from the language, what other symbolic systems can be there? So this is the question from Mrs. Nguyen Ho.
Right. Well, the language is one modality, and that's why you talk about multimodality. You can make meaning with many different modalities. The modalities have to do with the perception, with the sensations, the embodied sensation. So music, for instance, is a system of sounds of different tones, different rhythms, different tempo, etc. We talk about music as being a symbolic system. Mathematics is another symbolic system. But also, for instance, one could say dance. Dance is a symbolic system because it's a structural symbols of steps and gestures and body movements that combine to make a whole and to be performable. So dance is another symbolic system. What else? One could, well, certainly painting. Painting is a symbolic system with the colors and the shapes and the distancing and all that goes into painting. So in the arts, all forms of arts are symbolic systems.
Yeah. Mr. Ibu? Yeah.
There is a question from the one of the participants whether it is okay for your PowerPoint to be shared here publicly, or you prefer that each of the participants who wants to have a PowerPoint presentation from you will contact you yourself, or what do you think?
No, that's fine. I mean, what do you want to do with them, with it?
One of the participants is asking your PowerPoint presentation.
Sure. You can share it.
Okay.
Yeah, because I do have 3 or 4 pages of references at the end. So they yeah.
Thank you for this, Professor.
Yes.
Pak Rof.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm afraid this is the end of our talk. Really, we feel that this morning at Indonesian local time, we feel really enlightened with your insights, perspective on how this language has symbolic power and how it operates in our daily life, and also how should language learners anticipate of this symbolic power existence in their repertoire. Yeah.
Thank you for the invitation to do that. And please, if anybody has questions that occur to them later, they should use my email and send me an email. I answer the email every time.
Pak Rafiq, can we take a picture for several sites for
Sure,
this?
yes. For the sake of documentation, in this really good occasion, I would like to take your time. All the participants, please get ready with your camera on. We would like to take some pictures for our documentation here. And then we did such a great talk with Professor Greg France. Yeah.
Thank you all.
Okay, so I will count 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay,
1,
thank you.
2,
Bye-bye.
3. Yeah. Thank you very much for the attendees, and this is the end of the international scholar engagement. So please wait for another series of international invited speakers that we will present to you. And of course, we will share the flyers, and also we will let you know when we have similar events like this in the future. Thank you very much. And don't forget to check your attendance for claiming the certificate of the program. Thank you. On behalf of the moderator, we thank you very much, and we really appreciate your presence today. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.